This series that we're starting into these next 5 weeks, this is a different kind of series. I just need to tell you that right up front. It's different in several ways. We're not studying one single passage. And secondly, I'm not going to try to prove everything from the Bible as we go through this series. And third way that is kind of different is this information we're going to talk about these next several weeks. I think this would be helpful to you, even if you're a person who you're not a Jesus follower yet. You wouldn't necessarily, if you're still checking all that out and you're not sure where you stand, you can still actually take the stuff we're going to talk about, especially today, and do something with it, and your life will be better for it. So that's a kind of a different thing. Maybe not what you expect when you come to church for the first time or something like that. This content we're looking at, I'm not attempting in this to be super scientific or clinically precise. I've taken several counseling classes, but if you look at the bulletin, you'll notice it says User's Guide to Emotions. This is not a psychologist or psychiatrist guide to emotions. I tried to put this like at the same level where I live. Okay, so it's not up here, it's where I am. It's a user's guide. So just kind of keep that in mind as we walk these next 5 weeks together. As we get started, here's what I want us to do. I'm going to throw out a series of would you rather type questions. So your choice is A or B, okay? So let's just kind of go over the rules really quickly. Everybody votes. I'll read the thing, and then we'll have a time for show of hands. Everybody votes. None of this chicken stuff. I'm sorry, I know the pastor's not supposed to insult anybody, but I already broke the rule. But everybody votes. And number two is A or B. I like both. Too bad. Pick. Okay. So here we go. Jason, would you bring up the first one here? Would you rather eat a hamburger or pizza? Okay, raise your hand if you're a hamburger. Okay, pizza people. All right. Oh, good. I'm starting to find out who my friends are. Great. No, I like them both. I really do. All right, next one. Would you rather be at the ocean or in the mountains? Okay. Ocean people. Woo. Mountain people. Time out. Some of you still aren't voting. All right. So this is how this works, okay? There's two choices. All right, we got it. All right, third one. Here we go. This is a little harder. Would you rather be embarrassed or frightened? Neither. All right? No, that's not an option. Okay? Embarrassed. Oh, look at you, courageous souls. Frightened. Yeah, oh man, yeah, I definitely, because embarrassed means I did something wrong. That was an easy one for me. All right, here's the last one. Would you rather believe a lie if it makes you happy? Believe a lie that makes you happy, or believe the truth even if it makes you sad? Ooh. Lie that makes me happy. There's no judgment coming from this, okay? The deacons are not looking. You're all good. Truth that makes you sad. You guys, thank you for participating in that. But I hope that last question was kind of hard. Because the truth of the matter is most people are on a happiness quest. They really are. They're not on a truth quest. As a missionary over these last 8 years, I would have loved it if most of the people in Portugal were on a truth quest. Like they were just wanted to know the truth. But that's not where most of my neighbors, the guys down at the cafe, that's not where they were at. They're on a happiness quest, weren't they? As I make that statement, we're on a happiness quest, not a truth quest, most of us. The question is why? What's the line? How does the last line go for every single fairy tale? Yeah. You ever think about why? I would say this. We would much rather feel happy. You're like, okay, Sherlock, where'd you get this from? We would much rather feel happy than afraid or guilty or angry or sad. But why? Why is that so true? I think we love to be happy because the sensation that goes with happiness is very pleasant. But the sensation that goes with some of these other things, and when you contrast the two, the sensation that goes with happiness versus the sensation that accompanies anger or guilt or sadness, when you compare those two, the sensation of happiness is even way greater, way more pleasant, way over the top. As a matter of fact, happiness feels so much better than the other emotions that most people will pursue happiness and try to avoid the other emotions at all costs. And as we think about our own lives, or we think about the lives of people around us, we've seen people who've paid amazingly high costs to pursue happiness and avoid all those other emotions, which leads to a series of questions that we're going to try to tackle together over these next 5 weeks. The first one of these questions is this. If that's true, if happiness is so attractive and these others are so unattractive, why would a good God create us with the ability to experience emotions that we would rather never feel? You with me? That's one of the questions we want to ask. And then secondly, what is the purpose of our emotions, and what do we do with them? Should we be led by our feelings and emotions? I think most people kind of do that. Or, should we try to suppress our emotions? There are plenty of religions out there that teach that the key to peace, right, is to purge ourselves of emotions. So should we try to go down that kind of a road, or what? You tracking with me this morning? So over the next few weeks, I want us together to ask for God's answers to some questions. There are 3 questions that we're going to try to answer together. One of them is one I've already mentioned. What do we, why did God create us with the ability to experience powerful emotions that we'd prefer to never feel? The second question is, what do I do with these emotions when they come? And then thirdly, what do I do with my desire to be happy? Because at the end of the day, I still really want to be happy. So what do I do with that? Those are the 3 questions we're going to try to camp on over these next 5 weeks together. But as we get started, let's start by thinking about what it is that our emotions do for us. So if you're on the handout, I'm finally there. I have arrived. What do our emotions do for us? Or some might say, what are the kind of the purposes of our emotions? Well, they do 3 things. Number 1, they help us to experience life more fully. A few of you were around years ago. I went through something pretty traumatic, and coming out the backside of that, I had to take some medicines and some things, and as a result of those 2, that combination of the trauma and the meds, I went through a period of time where I just didn't really feel much of anything. The lows were gone, which was a kind of a relief, but there were no highs either. Just kind of like numb, really, was the right word. You think about that. Think about how different our lives would be if we didn't have emotions. How much of what we actually call experience, or how much of what we actually call memories, would we lose just completely? It wouldn't stick with us. It'd be gone if the emotions were gone. So that's one of the things our emotions do for us. The second one is they help alert us to what's happening. Or they help us to perceive something, to realize what's going on. Our emotions help us to realize how our mind and how our body is responding to something that's going on in our world. And our emotions give us this feeling, and that feeling causes us to go, oh, or it can cause us to go, oh, I must be upset, or I must be sad, or what? And that means something. It means something is going on. That must bother me more than I thought it did. That kind of a thing. And we're going this idea will make a whole lot more sense as we climb through the chart together in a minute. And then the third thing is that our emotions lead us to action. They lead us to action. I think done right, they lead us to do something. And not only that, they give us a motivation that we can feel. A number of our feelings and our emotions actually have a corresponding part in our body, right? You feel emotions, but you also, some of them, you actually literally feel something in your body, whether it's in your shoulders or in your stomach. In 6th grade, I had an English teacher, a large German woman. I'm not sure what that has to do with anything. Well, I just told you that. But anyway, she would, as she got angry, you could see it physically. She was like a thermometer. It would start right here, and she would turn bright red. And as the angrier she got, it would move up her neck and into her head and so on. If it got to the forehead, it was all over for us. It was all over. So one of the objectives for, I think, a number of the boys, you got to remember, it was the 6th grade. There were 30-some of us in this class. Probably 20 of us were boys. The objectives was to get her to hear, but not to hear. So they would purposely annoy her, and they'd be going, oh, look at me. You know, she's just getting redder and redder. But you knew you don't get to hear, okay? Yeah. Because a lot of our emotions cause something physical within us, don't they? And we figured that out as 6th graders. So here we go. Let's work through this chart. We're going to look at 7 powerful emotions today and what they help us to do and what they motivate us to do. We're going to start with happiness. Happiness helps us to enjoy God's good gifts. Or in other words, I could say it this way if I was rethinking how we wanted to do this chart. When we realize that we're having that sensation of happiness, that can cause us to recognize, hey, you know what? There's something good in my life. There's a lot of stuff in my life I maybe prefer to not have, right? But that happiness, the existence of happiness could trigger to us that realization that, you know, there's something good in my life going on right now. And that could help us to really enjoy that. Psalm 144 talks about a time in Israel's history that's yet to come. Something, part of their hope that they're looking forward to. And I love how David phrases this. He says, then our sons will be like plants nurtured in their youth, and our daughters like corner pillars that are carved in the palace style. Our storehouses will be full, supplying all kinds of produce. Our flocks will increase by the thousands, and tens of thousands in our open fields. Our cattle will be well fed. There will be no breach in the walls, no going into captivity, no cry of lament in our public squares. In other words, life is finally going to be great. It's going to be good at home. It's going to be good on our bank account. It's going to be good with our friendships. Life will finally be great. And then look what he says. Whew. Happy are the people with such blessings. Man. Happy are the people whose God is the Lord. See, that sensation of happiness kind of wakes us up, calls our attention to the fact that, whoa, I'm blessed, at least in this one area, right? And that should trigger something. James 1:17 says that every good gift and every perfect gift is something that I have earned. Not in the CSB, it doesn't say that. No, every good and perfect gift comes from above. There's a good, so happiness alerts us to the fact that, man, there's something good in my life right now. And that isn't mine that I generated. That came from a God above who loves me. And that motivates us, guys, to thank God for giving that good thing. That's what it motivates us to do, right, as you're filling out the chart there. See, this is where I think we go bad. I think in our culture, it's very easy to think that the purpose of happiness is to feel happy. Is that right? That the purpose of happiness is to feel the pleasantness that goes with being happy. So the purpose of happiness is just to be happy, but I don't think that's it at all. I think the purpose of happiness is to trigger 2 other things. Number 1 is to trigger soaking up the moment. So you sip that coffee just a little bit more slowly, right? You're drinking that drink and you're like, whoa, this tastes good. Now, maybe coffee for some of you wasn't the right answer. Maybe it's some other beverage. But you sip it and you go, you know, I really like this. So you soak up the moment. Or I really like this person, and so you just lean in just a little bit, and you're still listening to her talk, but you're just kind of overwhelmed by the fact that this person is my friend, and we've had this friendship for a long time, and it's sweet. See, happiness is meant to be a trigger to soak up the moment, to look at that incredible landscape just a little bit longer, and perhaps not just grab a selfie, but to grab a picture and look at it and say, wow, that's beautiful. And then secondly, it's to trigger that gratitude and say, wow, God, thank you for giving me that ability to taste so many different flavors. Thank you for that person, or thank you for this time that I have to actually just stop and smell the roses or look at that sunset, right? That's the purpose of happiness. It helps us to realize something is going on in our life, good things, blessing, but then it motivates us to soak it up and to thank God. Let's move on to the next one, though. Anger. Now, by the way, let me just stop and get the obvious out of the way. All these emotions can go south, okay? All these emotions can be totally wrong because they're motivated by the wrong stuff. So I'm not talking about the kind of anger that's like the temper tantrum kind of anger. I didn't get my way. You're in my way. Get thee hence. I'm not talking about that kind of anger. I'm talking about the anger that's, I'm angry because there's actually something legitimately wrong. There's injustice going on here. Okay, and as we go down through the chart, I'm talking about the good version of all of these. Okay? So the purpose of anger, what anger helps us to do, you physically can feel anger. You might even be able to demonstrate it right on your forehead. What anger helps us to do is recognize I am in the presence of wrongdoing or injustice. There's an example in Matthew 23. Jesus was with these Pharisees and scribes, and listen to what he said to him. He says, "Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces, for you don't go in, and you don't allow others entering to go in." That's wrong. Jesus was saying, listen, if you don't want to go to heaven, that's your business. But you have no right to keep other people from going who'd like to go. That's wrong. And in the presence of that wrongness, that wrongdoing, that injustice, he was angry. He was angry. And so what are we supposed to do with that? Well, anger is designed to help us realize, whoa, there's something going on here that should not be allowed to continue. And then when we realize that, then we use that as a motivation to attack the problem. Now, I know most of the time we don't attack the problem, we attack yeah, there you go. So and the story I'm about to tell you is an example of sort of attacking the person. But I remember, again, back to high school, I was sitting there and in my seat, and I was pretty timid in high school. And but the guy across, right in the next chair over, was harassing the girl in front of him. She had a skirt on, and he was leaning forward, and he would grab both sides of her skirt and pull it back towards him. So he's pulling her skirt up. And then he would tip his head around the side, in part so he could see her face, how red she was getting, but also so he could try to see up her skirt. So he's like all contorted out of his chair trying to do this. And she's sitting there, and we're trying to pull her skirt back down, and she's sitting in front of him, and about a minute or two later, he'd reach behind her, and he's doing it again. And this was continuing all throughout the period, my English class. And I told you, I was a pretty timid guy. I was a pretty small guy, weighed a good bit less than even what I weigh now. He was not a small guy. He was on our football team and stuff like that. And so this kept going on, and I'm getting angrier and angrier. This girl was not a friend of mine. But this is just wrong. You know what I'm saying? This is wrong. And so finally, it was right near the end of the period, and I couldn't take it any longer, and I grabbed my literature book, which was about this size. And he leans over again. He's got a hold of her skirt, and he's leaned over like this, so his head, the back of his head, is facing me. He's leaned over like this, trying to see up her skirt again. And I took my book, and I got up, and I went, boom, right upside of his head. So hard that not only did I set him back up, I knocked him clean out of his chair. And the only reason I'm still alive to tell you this today is when he was sprawled out there on the floor, and he asked who did it, and people said Cook did it. He knew I was so timid I would never have had the courage to do that. He did not believe that I was the one who did it. Otherwise, Joel would be pastoring this church all by himself. But see, that guy, now maybe I shouldn't have hit him. I don't know. I'm not sure. It was a different day back then. But But he found me. Do you see what anger, the right kind of anger can do for us? The right kind of anger gives us two things that we would normally never have. There are a lot of problems in our world that just should not continue, but we would be tempted to ignore them. But the right kind of anger gives us courage and energy. In this case, we call it adrenaline. That we wouldn't normally have. And we go out and we confront the issue that maybe we've even seen it a bunch of times in the past, and we let it go, we let it slide, we ignored it. But no, it cannot continue because that is wrong. That's the good side of anger. Let's jump down to the next one, fear. Fear, when we start feeling that sensation of fear, what does that do for us? Well, that helps us recognize, hey, whoa, you might be in danger here. And fear is probably only bad when we either fear discomfort instead of danger. I think that happens, at least to me. I feel being out of my comfort zone. That's not danger. Or fear is bad when I refuse to act courageously even though God requires action. Fear is bad in that case. But fear in itself isn't a bad thing. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 3 says that a sensible person sees danger and takes cover. But the inexperienced, they just keep on going and suffer the consequences, right? The fools continue and they are harmed, they are punished or whatever. But the sensible person actually recognizes, hey, I'm in danger here, and then takes some appropriate action. Most of the time, the appropriate action for us, as this is what's on your notes, is to proceed, but to proceed with caution. But if I didn't have fear, you can see where I would be? I'd be far more vulnerable, wouldn't I? Because I wouldn't recognize that this is a time that it needs caution. Even if it's as simple as walking out of this building at night when the sun has melted the snow all day and that nice thin layer of liquid has all gone all down our parking lot, and now it's night and it's frozen. And I'm just old enough now, I'm afraid if I fall, I'm going to break something. So I walk differently. I still go to my car, but I do so with caution. And I had the deacons help me. Not really. Next emotion, let's talk about guilt. Oh, guilt. Guilt, when we start having that sensation of guilt, guilt enables us to realize that our actions have hurt our relationship. That our actions actually did damage to the relationship, our relationship with God, and perhaps with another person. And then that realization, that angst, that pain that goes with guilt, that helps us to do several things. There are three of them I think I put up here on the chart. To admit the wrong. By the way, if you're looking for an instant way to improve your ability to apologize to somebody, just here it is. Three things, right? Number one, admit the wrong. Say, you know, when I did that, I did this thing yesterday, that was wrong of me. And then number two, to acknowledge the hurt. Now that takes a little bit of preparation. You actually have to kind of think about, what did my action do? Let me just give an example here that maybe will make more sense. But imagine that you and I were in a conversation, and I, for whatever reason, I lied to you. And now I'm coming back to you to set that straight. And so I look at you and I say, listen, the other day when you and I were talking, and you may have already figured out that I lied to you, but even if you didn't, I need to tell you that when we were talking, I told you that thing, that was not true, and I lied to you, and that was wrong. And I'm really sorry about that. And I realized that when I lied to you, and now that you've realized that I've lied to you, that probably really hurts, because I don't know all the ways that hurt, but I know this. You're a great person, and you want to trust me. And now I've made that really hard for you. I have stolen from you a little bit of your ability to trust me without having a question mark come in your mind. And I realize for the next period of time, when I say something that sounds like really incredible, hard to believe, You might find that really hard to believe, and I did that to you. I put that hurt in you. And there might be other ways that I hurt you too, and you, if you wish, you can share what those are with me, but this is the one that I figured out. And so I'm really sorry about that, and I'm going to ask you if you would be willing to forgive me for that. Guys, the purpose of guilt isn't to make us feel guilty. Do you see the grace gift that we have here? How many unreconciled relationships would we not have if God, or would we have, how am I supposed to say that? How many unreconciled relationships would be in our lives if God did not create us with the ability to feel guilt? The purpose of guilt isn't to make us feel guilty. The purpose of guilt is to make us feel miserable enough that we'll stop for a minute and realize, whoa, I actually need to stop here and not just keep running with my life because I've actually hurt this relationship and I need to do something about it. And then have the courage to go and do it. That's what guilt helps us to do. In Psalm 32, there's an example of a guy who, he kind of put that off. He says that, he talks about his final experience. He says, how joyful is the one whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. How joyful is the person whom the Lord does not charge with iniquity, and in whose spirit is no deceit. But when I kept silent, or in other words, when I was feeling guilty, but I didn't let guilt drive me to what is supposed to make me motivated to do, when I just felt guilty and stayed there, he says, when I kept silent, my bones became brittle from groaning all day long. For day and night, your hand was heavy on me. My strength was drained as in the summer's heat. In other words, it was just killing me. So then I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not conceal my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord. And praise God, you forgave my guilt. Let's jump to sadness. Sadness helps us perceive the loss of something valuable. I start having that sensation. I'm just really down. I'm sad. And that can help me to realize, wait, did I lose something of tremendous value here? Because this is really bothering me. Maybe I did. And you start working through it. I like in Nehemiah chapter 2, Nehemiah gives us a little window into his life. And by way of context, if you don't know the story, Nehemiah was in exile, and he was serving as a cupbearer to a king. And but the rest of his family, a lot of his family, was still living back in the home area, hometown, that was now in ruins. And it was extremely vulnerable to the local enemies and population, hoodlums and gangs and all that kind of stuff. And so some members of his family came to visit Nehemiah. He asked him how he was going back home. They told him, and he was just devastated. He was just wrecked by what he heard about this devastation back in his home area. And it so bothered him that he was just visibly upset, visibly sad, which was a dangerous thing to do because theologians tell us that the kings in those days had a rule that you had to always look happy in their presence. They didn't want to be reminded that the rest of the world wasn't as well off as they were. Okay? So here we go. We jump in the story. During the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was set before him, I took the wine and gave it to the king, and I had never been sad in his presence. So the king said to me, why are you sad when you aren't sick? This is nothing but sadness of heart. Look at Nehemiah's response. I was overwhelmed with fear. That's because he broke the rule thing, right? By the way, the penalty for looking sad in the king's presence was death penalty. So that explains the fear, right? Danger. He says, I replied to the king, may the king live forever. But catch this part. Why should I not be sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire? In the light of this horrible loss to all the people that I hold dear, the only emotion that makes sense in the face of this much loss is sadness. I'm not melancholy. I'm realistic about the fact that we were once a people that had an identity, and we don't anymore. We were once a people that had safety and security, and we don't anymore. We were once a people who were able to do things as a nation. We were a blessing, and we're not anymore. All that is gone, and I don't see any way that it's coming back anytime soon. That's what sadness, the good kind of sadness, does for us. It helps us recognize that, hey, whoa, there was great blessing in my life. Excuse me, can you shut this off for just a sec? No one's talking to you. All right, thanks, Tim. Sadness alerts us that we're sensing that something truly valuable was lost. A number of you know that back around Thanksgiving time, we lost my mom. And there's so much to be grateful for and how that played out and the fact that we were here. I am truly, truly grateful. That funeral was an incredible service. My dad did a fantastic job. There were so many people who testified to the impact my mom had had. So there's so much to be grateful for. But the Apostle Paul, in talking about when people like my mom, people who have solid faith in Jesus Christ, pass away, he wrote this. He says, we don't grieve as those who have no hope. In other words, he's like, we don't grieve like the people who have no hope. They don't have any belief that they're going to ever see that person again, and that person is with Jesus Christ and all is well with them. He said, we don't grieve like that. But notice what he didn't say. He did not say, we don't grieve. We do grieve. That's what sadness done right does for us. It is a trigger that I need to give voice to my pain. And I need to grieve and to mourn. Many of us know somebody who's experienced amazing loss, and they have not walked down this pathway of giving voice to that in a healthy way. They have not grieved. They've not mourned. They're just stuck in the sad cycle. And it is devastating to their ability to move forward, and to not only move forward, but to enjoy life again, to enjoy blessings. When we don't grieve and we don't mourn, we cut ourselves off from the ability to truly experience the good stuff that God is bringing into our lives. That's why I think God gave us so many examples. The lament psalms, right? There's like 60 of them. Examples of how to do this in the scriptures. I need to keep moving. Let's talk about jealousy for a second. And notice when I say jealousy, I'm not talking about envy, and I'm not talking about possessive boyfriends here. I'm not talking that kind of jealousy. I'm talking about the simple fact that jealousy helps us to perceive that the exclusivity of our relationship is being threatened. There are things, guys, that are meant to be shared. And there are things that are not. Cookies, shared. Toothbrush, not shared. Right? Lunch, shared. Girlfriend, not shared. God models this for us. He says he is a jealous God. God has no intention of sharing our affection for a God, giving some to him and some to some other idols in our lives. No intention whatsoever putting up with that. It is an exclusive relationship. So the good kind of jealousy is when we realize, well, I'm in a relationship, and so for whatever reason, this relationship is now vulnerable. And it could be very vulnerable to the advances of a man or woman or whatever, depending on. And so the good kind of jealousy helps us realize that this relationship is now vulnerable, so that I can then what? Take action to protect the relationship. Let's talk about compassion. Compassion helps us when we start feeling compassion. That's another one you can feel right in your gut. That helps you realize you're in the presence of pain or neediness. So that we'll do what? You guys are really smart. You can fill this out. What's the next blank? So that when we start feeling that, we realize that we're in the presence of this pain and neediness, and that motivates us to try to help. Try to relieve some of that pain. Try to do something. Now, like I said earlier, all these emotions can be perverted. They can all be motivated by selfishness. They can all lead us to oppress others. They can all enslave us. But they can also, I hope what we looked at this morning, they can be a force for good. The difference depends on the reason that we're experiencing the anger, the sadness, the guilt, the fear, the jealousy, and what we do in response. Right? That's where the difference comes in those two things. Now, and I have thought far enough down this line to say there are some emotions I think that are always indicators that there's something wrong. For example, let's talk envy for just a minute. Envy, you can feel envy. You start looking at somebody else's life and you're like realizing that they've got it easier or better or more, right? And so you start getting, right, she's skinnier or smarter or whatever, and so you realize that there's something going on there. That is a horrible thing in that there's something horrible going on at the heart level. But the beauty of it, this is the beauty of it, is that realization, that emotion helps us to realize what's going on at the heart level. Helps us to begin to realize that at least at some level, I am discontent with what God has given to me, and I think God might owe me a little something because He has been better off or been kinder to her or them than He has been to me. And realizing that, when we sense that, when envy helps us to realize, whoa, I'm discontent here, and I'm thinking that God should have and could have, but He chose not to, and I don't like that so much. That's supposed to motivate us to what? Repentance, right? I saw it in the back, repentance. So, again, we don't want to be envious, but here's what we really, really don't want. What we really don't want is to have those kinds of attitudes rolling around in our head and not realize it. And it's our emotions to help us to realize, alert us to what is going on and how we're responding to what's going on in our world around us. Does this all make sense? So let's give us a big idea as we bring this in for a close. Our emotions, including the ones we'd rather not feel, serve important God-designed purposes in our lives. Our emotions, including the ones that we'd rather never feel. I don't want fear. I don't want sadness. I just want to be happy. But our emotions serve important God-designed purposes in our lives. If you're part of a small group, I give you an idea this week. Perhaps maybe what you want to do in your small group is just talk about what are the implications of that truth right there. What are the implications of that for us as we try to live out our faith in our daily context? What are some of the implications of that? If you're not in a small group or you're in a small group that doesn't, you got a different study, you just think on your own, maybe talk it over with somebody else. What are the implications of this? I think as I want to wrap this up, by default, I think most of us underuse our emotions. And by that, I don't mean that we're not emotional enough. Some of us maybe not, we're not emotional enough. Some of us we're plenty emotional. Okay, that's not a problem. But I think by default, the tendency is to experience emotions, but not let them lead us to what it is God designed for them to motivate us to do. The second half of that chart. Not allow them to help us really use them as a way to help us recognize what's going on in us and then help motivate us to do what it is we ought to do with that. I think a lot of us tend to underuse our emotions. We just kind of experience them and hope that this one will pass and we'll get back to happiness. Because that one feels good. Yeah. Can I pray for us? And we'll pick up this conversation next week. That'd be great. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you so much that in your incredible grace, you designed us with the ability to experience things, and those things give us the capacity to help alert us to what's going on within us, but then also help motivate us to take some actions so that we can be whole people, healthy people, people who are able to live out the gospel in front of those around us, people who are able to model the distinctiveness that comes with knowing Jesus Christ and having so many of the big questions in life already answered and so secure. Lord, I just want to thank you for the grace of emotions, including the ones we'd rather not feel. And help us to, as we work through this over these next few weeks. I pray that our time together will be honoring to you and helpful to us. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.